The first night, I thought it was thunder. Our cabins rattled, windows shivering in their wooden frames, and every kid at Camp Blackwood sat upright in bed at the same moment holding their breath. Outside, the trees groaned, their branches swaying even though there was no wind. I remember the way my chest tightened, the kind of fear that has no name yet, only instinct. The earth shouldn't move like that, not in the middle of the mountains. Then it stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. I could hear my bunkmates' shallow breathing, the drip of water from the sink in the corner, and somewhere outside, faint but sharp enough to make my skin crawl, a long dragging sound, like stone scraping against stone. "Did you feel that?" whispered Hannah from the bunk above mine. "Yeah," I whispered back. She didn't say anything else. None of us did. In the morning, the counselors brushed it off. "Old ground, old timbers," one of them said, forcing a smile. "Sometimes the mountain shifts." We were supposed to believe it was nothing. Kids laughed, shrugged, went back to their routines, but I noticed how the counselors avoided looking toward the edge of camp, the far side where the trees grew denser and the ground dipped away in a shallow slope. That's where the gate was. We weren't supposed to go near it. The rules were clear: cabins, mess hall, lake, trails, but stay away from the south fence. Nobody said why. The gate was locked, and beyond it, the forest seemed darker, thicker, as though the trees leaned in close to hide something. That night, the tremor came again, stronger. My cot slid an inch across the floor. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, cut off mid-yelp. This time, I heard something else. Beneath the shaking, beneath the rattling glass, I swear I heard it. A low groan, like the mountain itself was breathing. It rolled up through the soil, through the foundation, into my bones. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still feel it vibrating in my chest, deep and ancient. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, curiosity pulled me toward the south fence. I wasn't the only one. A group of us lingered by the mess hall after breakfast, trading rumors. Hannah swore she'd heard voices. Lucas claimed he'd seen smoke rising from the trees. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. Whatever was making the ground shake was coming from there. By midday, I worked up the courage to follow the trail that curved close to the fence line. I shouldn't have. Even now, I wish I hadn't. The gate was old iron, streaked with rust, and behind it was a wide hole in the ground, rimmed with collapsed wooden beams. It wasn't just a hole, it was a shaft, plunging down into darkness so deep I couldn't see the bottom. Cold air poured out of it, damp and metallic, carrying a smell I can only describe as rotten iron. And then I heard it. A whisper. At first I thought it was just the wind sliding through broken timbers, but no. This voice shaped itself around my name. "Daniel." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, tripping over roots, heart hammering. Nobody else was there. The camp was silent, but the whisper followed me, soft as breath, rising from the shaft. The ground trembled again, just once, almost gently, as if something deep below had shifted in its sleep. I didn't tell anyone what I'd heard at the fence. Maybe I should have, but how do you admit something like that without sounding insane? Voices don't come out of holes in the ground. At least that's what I told myself as I tried to forget the whisper of my name curling out of the mineshaft like smoke. The problem was, I couldn't forget. The smell clung to me, cold, metallic, like I'd swallowed a coin and couldn't get the taste out of my mouth. That night, lying in my bunk, I felt sure the voice would return. But the tremors didn't come, and the silence stretched so thin it was almost worse. The next morning during archery practice, Counselor Greg made the mistake of leading us too far down the south trail. We came around a bend, and there it was again, the iron gate, only this time in full daylight, every rust-streaked bar glowing orange in the sun. "All right, back we go," Greg said quickly, steering us around. But someone asked, "What is that place?" Greg's jaw tightened. "Old mine. Collapsed years ago. Nothing to see." "Why is it locked?" Lucas asked. "To keep curious kids like you out," Greg snapped, more sharply than he meant. His face softened, but only slightly. "Look, the mountain isn't safe there. Tunnels run under half this place. You fall in, nobody's pulling you back out, so stay clear. That's not a suggestion." The others muttered and moved on, but I hung back just long enough to glance through the bars again. In daylight, the shaft looked even worse. Jagged timbers leaned across the opening like ribs, and the shadows inside weren't just black. They looked layered, shifting, as if the dark itself had weight. That night, Hannah cornered me in the mess hall. "You looked pale out there," she said. "You know something, don't you?" I hesitated. Her eyes searched mine, steady and unflinching. Finally, I whispered, "I heard something from down there." She leaned in. "What kind of something?" "Like a voice." Her lips parted, but she didn't laugh. She didn't call me crazy. She just said very softly, "Me too." The air between us grew heavy. We didn't speak of it again, not then, but a silent understanding passed between us. Whatever was in that shaft, it wasn't just in my head. Later, long after lights out, I woke to footsteps outside our cabin. Slow, deliberate. I thought maybe it was Greg making rounds, but then I saw Lucas slipping past the window, flashlight in hand. Curiosity won. I pulled on my shoes and followed. Hannah must have heard too, because she joined me, her face pale in the moonlight. Together we trailed Lucas to the gate. He was already crouched by the bars, shining his light into the shaft. The beam caught on something slick below, like wet stone, but not stone. It rippled, just for a second, as though something massive shifted out of sight. Lucas leaned closer. Holy hell. The ground quivered beneath us, so faint it felt like a heartbeat. Hannah grabbed my arm, and then, from the depths, the whisper rose again. Not just my name this time, all of ours. The whisper didn't sound like one voice. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, layered together, a chorus of breath that slid up the shaft and wrapped around us like fog. The sound carried no direction, no source. It was everywhere at once. Lucas froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Hannah clutched my arm so tight I thought her nails might draw blood. For a second, none of us breathed. Then the voices stopped. The silence snapped so suddenly it made my ears ring. Lucas scrambled backward, stumbling on the loose dirt. Did you hear?" "Yes," Hannah hissed. "We all heard it." "No, I mean, it knew my name." Lucas's voice cracked on the last word. He wasn't the cocky, fearless kid I knew anymore. He looked small, pale, stripped of bravado. Before I could answer, the flashlight flickered. The beam cut in and out, sputtering like a candle about to die. The shadows on the timbers seemed to twitch with every blink of light, stretching, recoiling, waiting. "Turn it off," I whispered harshly. Lucas obeyed without argument. We stood in the dark, the moon barely piercing through the trees. The shaft yawned before us, a wound in the earth, exhaling its cold breath. I thought I saw movement deep inside, but maybe it was only my eyes adjusting. Hannah tugged my sleeve. "We need to go back, now." We didn't run, though every muscle screamed too. We walked quickly, heads down, until the cabins came into view again. Only then did we let out the breaths we'd been holding. Back inside, I expected we'd never talk about it again, pretend it hadn't happened. But the whisper clung to me. Even lying in bed, I swore I could feel it in my skull, echoing faintly, words that weren't quite words. When morning came, none of us looked rested. Lucas kept glancing at the tree line like he expected something to follow him out. Hannah avoided eye contact with anyone but me. At breakfast, Counselor Greg noticed. "Rough night?" he asked lightly, but his eyes weren't smiling. Before I could reply, the ground shuddered again, harder this time. Plates rattled, milk sloshed across the tables. Kids screamed as the entire mess hall groaned, beams creaking overhead. Then silence. Everyone froze. From somewhere beneath us came a hollow thump, like something heavy shifting far below. The counselors exchanged quick, tight looks. One of them muttered, "Not again." The rest of the day passed under a veil of unease. The tremor became the only thing anyone talked about. Rumors spread, collapsed tunnels, earthquakes, cursed ground. Nobody wanted to admit what Hannah, Lucas, and I already knew, that something down there was awake. That night, I dreamt I was inside the shaft. The walls were slick, the air choked with metallic dust. I couldn't see the bottom, but I could hear it breathing. The whispers pressed close, so near I felt hot breath on my neck. One voice rose above the rest, low, ancient, impossible. It said, "Closer." I woke drenched in sweat, the taste of iron in my mouth. Hannah sat up in her bunk at the same time, gasping. She didn't have to say anything. I knew she'd dreamt it too. Across the cabin, Lucas whispered into the dark, "It wants us." By the fourth night, none of us were sleeping. The tremors came in irregular waves, sometimes a faint vibration that tickled the soles of our feet, sometimes violent enough to rattle nails loose from the cabin walls. Every time, the whispers seemed louder, closer, as though the earth itself had a mouth pressed against our ears. By then, it wasn't just me, Hannah, and Lucas. A few others had started paying attention too. Whispers in the woods, shadows moving where there shouldn't be shadows, lights flickering in the cabins even when the generators ran steady. Curiosity spread like infection, fear disguised as fascination. And finally, someone suggested what we all knew was coming. "We should go down there," Lucas whispered. We were huddled around a dying fire after lights out, the counselors long gone to their own cabins. Sparks popped in the dark as his words hung between us. Hannah's eyes widened. I shook my head immediately, but I could see the hunger in the others' faces, fear and thrill tangled together. "You're insane," Hannah said flatly. "Am I?" Lucas leaned forward, his face glowing in the embers. "It calls to us. Don't you feel it? It wants us there." "That's exactly why we shouldn't," I hissed. But the decision had already been made. By midnight, 5 of us crept to the south fence. Me, Hannah, Lucas, and 2 others, Jesse and Mark. Lucas carried ropes stolen from the boating shed. Jesse had swiped a lantern. My hands shook so badly I could barely untwist the chain around the gate. The shaft gaped before us, breathing cold air. The lantern light pooled on the dirt, swallowed whole by the dark below. "I'll go first," Lucas said, tying the rope around his waist. His bravado returned, but it felt hollow, desperate. He lowered himself slowly, boots scraping against damp stone, lantern beam swinging wildly. Every creak of the rope sent my stomach lurch. The shaft swallowed him inch by inch until only his trembling light remained. "How far does it go?" Mark whispered. Lucas's voice drifted up, muffled, distorted. "Deeper, way deeper than it looks. I can't see the bottom." The rope trembled in my hands. For a moment I thought it was him shifting his weight. Then I realized it wasn't. The tremor was rising again, stronger, rolling through the rope itself. "Pull me up," Lucas shouted suddenly, panic cracking his voice. "Now, pull me!" We yanked, hands burning on the rope. The lantern swung violently, beam flashing against the shaft walls. In that flicker, I saw it. A hand, not human. Too long, too thin, fingers jointed like broken twigs. It reached from the dark, scrabbling against the stone just below Lucas's dangling boots. We pulled harder. Lucas's scream tore the night in half. His feet kicked wildly, barely escaping the clutch of that thing. Then he burst over the rim, collapsing on the dirt, rope still tied around his waist. The lantern fell. We watched it tumble, tumbling endlessly, shrinking to a pinprick of light. We waited for the sound of it breaking. It never came. Only the whispers, rising louder, furious now, as though we'd denied the shaft what it wanted. Lucas wouldn't stop shaking. Even after we untied the rope and dragged him back to the cabins, his body trembled like a leaf caught in wind. His lips moved, repeating the same words over and over. "It touched me. It touched me." We tried to calm him, but nothing worked. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him under, though his sleep was restless and filled with whimpers. Hannah and I sat awake beside him, listening to the camp creak and groan around us. Neither of us dared close our eyes. By morning, Lucas was gone. His bunk lay empty, sheets twisted, pillow damp with sweat. The rope he'd used still lay coiled at the foot of the bed, frayed at the ends as if it had been gnawed. We tore through the cabins, the mess hall, even the trails, but there was no sign of him. The counselors whispered among themselves, their faces tight and pale. "Probably ran off," one said aloud, forcing a laugh. "Kids get scared sometimes, bolt into the woods. We'll find him." But I saw the fear in their eyes. They didn't believe it any more than we did. That night, the tremors came again, violent this time, hard enough to knock a lamp from the table. The floorboards groaned as if something huge shifted beneath them. From outside came the sharp crack of trees snapping, branches splintering. The entire cabin leaned as though something pressed against it from below. Then it stopped. The silence afterward was suffocating. We gathered in the dark, holding our breaths, waiting. Hannah squeezed my hand until it hurt. Jesse whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was only the ringing in my ears. Then I caught it too. The faint scrape of claws against wood, not from outside, from underneath. The floor shuddered. Dust sifted from the rafters. Something pressed up against the boards from below, testing, searching. A knot in the wood bulged upward as though swollen from within. We walked away, huddled in the farthest corner. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. Then the board cracked. A splintered hole opened, and through it came a hand, the same twisted shape I'd glimpsed in the shaft. Fingers too long, bent in wrong places, clawing blindly into the air. It smelled of rust and rot, the stink of old iron and wet earth. Jesse screamed. The hand scrabbled, nails raking the floor, pulling, dragging something else behind it. I saw a second hand, then a sliver of an arm, the flesh stretched thin over jutting bone. We didn't wait to see the rest. Hannah grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door. We stumbled into the night as more boards snapped behind us. The counselors were already outside, shouting, corralling kids into a panicked crowd. From our cabin came the sound of wood splintering, tearing, as something enormous forced its way out. Shadows shifted behind the windows, wrong shapes moving where no one should be. Then silence again. One counselor, pale as chalk, whispered, "It crawled out." But when we rushed back inside, the cabin was empty. The hole in the floor gaped wide, edges splintered, leading into a darkness that breathed cold air into the room. And Lucas's voice drifted up from below, soft and broken, calling my name. At sunrise, the counselors made their decision. They gathered us in the mess hall, their faces drawn and pale, trying to sound firm but failing. "Lucas is missing," Greg announced. "We're organizing a search. Nobody goes near the south fence. Do you understand?" Murmurs rippled through the kids. Fear sat heavy in the air, thicker than the smell of burned toast drifting from the kitchen. We all nodded, but we knew what they didn't say aloud. Lucas wasn't lost in the woods. He was down there. By mid-morning, Greg and 2 others carried lanterns, ropes, and a pack of old maps. I watched from a distance as they unlocked the gate and stepped toward the shaft. Even from where I stood, I could feel the cold rolling out, raising goosebumps across my arms. "Stay close," one counselor muttered. They tied ropes around their waists and began lowering themselves in. The moment their boots scraped the stone, the tremor came. Not a violent quake, just a pulse, a single throb through the ground like the heartbeat of the mountain. The rope swayed, the lantern flames guttered. I swear I heard the whispers again, but not in words. It was a vibration, a rhythm, too deep to understand. Minutes stretched. The 3 of them disappeared into the dark, their lanterns swinging until they became faint, glimmering specks. We waited. The camp grew eerily silent. No birds, no rustle of wind. Only the sound of the ropes creaking as they fed deeper into the shaft. Then a shout. Muffled, panicked, too far below to make out the words. Another shout followed, and then a sound that made every hair on my body rise. Laughter. Not from the counselors. Something else, echoing up the shaft, hollow and wet, like air wheezing through a broken flute. The ropes jerked, hard. One pulled taut, then went slack with a sharp twang, whipping back over the rim. The other 2 quivered violently, dragged downward. "Pull them up!" Greg's voice rang out from the dark. "Pull us!" The cry cut off. We yanked the ropes, but they slid like snakes through our hands, slick with something damp. When we finally dragged the ends up, the fibers were frayed, dripping with a black sludge that smelled of metal and rot. The lantern light below had vanished. The shaft exhaled. A gust of cold, fetid air blew across our faces, carrying with it a stench so thick I gagged. It was more than the smell of decay. It was the smell of something alive, something that had been buried too long. The remaining counselors tried to calm us, their voices trembling. They'll find another way out. Old tunnels, you know how they twist. We'll search." But nobody moved to follow. Nobody believed it. That night, none of us dared sleep. We huddled in the cabins, listening. The ground shifted beneath us in slow, rolling waves. Sometimes it was so faint it felt like a trick of the imagination. Other times it rattled the glass in the windows. Somewhere deep in the earth, something moved. Something vast. When the whispers returned, they weren't calling names anymore. They were chanting. Low, rhythmic, endless. The words meant nothing, yet every syllable sank into my chest like hooks, pulling me closer to the dark. And once, just once, I thought I heard Greg's voice among them. The day after the counselors vanished, the camp felt hollow. Their cabins stood empty, lanterns left burning inside, beds unmade. Nobody spoke above a whisper, as though raising our voices might draw the thing in the ground closer. That evening, instead of the usual games, we were told to gather by the fire. The man who called us wasn't a counselor. He was the groundskeeper, a wiry old figure named Walter, who usually kept to himself. His face was seamed like bark, his hands stained with soil. He rarely spoke, but now his eyes gleamed in the firelight, hard and tired. "You've all heard the whispers," he said flatly. A ripple went through the crowd. Hannah's hand found mine, cold and tight. Walter poked at the fire with an iron rod, sending sparks spiraling upward. The mine wasn't abandoned because it ran dry. It was abandoned because it reached too far. We leaned in, caught despite our fear. "They started digging here 80 years ago," he continued. "A silver rush, they called it. Men came from all over, greedy for what they thought was buried under this mountain. And they found it, veins of metal richer than anything in the state. But they kept digging, deeper and deeper, past the stone, past the roots, into layers that weren't meant to be touched." His voice dropped low, almost swallowed by the crackle of the fire. "The first to disappear were the animals. Dogs, deer, even birds. Then miners. Men who went down in the morning never came back up. The ones who did weren't the same. They talked about voices, about shadows that moved on their own. They smelled like iron, even when they bled. The company tried to seal it, but the ground wouldn't stay shut. Every time they filled it in, the earth cracked it open again." Jessie blurted out, "What's down there?" Walter fixed her with eyes that burned like coals. "Something old, something hungry." The deeper they dug, the louder it became, till the mountain itself started to shake. The fire popped and someone screamed. For a moment, panic surged. Walter raised his hand, calming us. "You think those tremors are earthquakes? No. They're it moving, shifting, stretching. Every quake is a reminder that it's still awake, still waiting." Hannah whispered, "Why build a camp here then? Why bring kids?" Walter's face hardened. "They thought it was safe. Thought if the shaft was locked and forgotten, the mountain would hold. But the mountain doesn't forget." A silence fell over us, heavy as the smoke. Somebody asked, "What happens if it comes out?" Walter's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Then you'll see why the mine was sealed, and you'll wish it had stayed that way." The fire burned lower. One by one, kids drifted back to their cabins, hushed and pale. Hannah and I lingered, staring into the embers. Walter remained by the flames, eyes fixed on the shadows. That night, as I lay in my bunk, I couldn't stop hearing his words. Something old, something hungry. And deep beneath us, the ground shifted again. Only this time, the tremor didn't fade. It kept pulsing, steady as a heartbeat, until I realized it wasn't the mountain moving. It was footsteps. By morning, the camp reeked. It wasn't smoke or sewage or rot. It was sharper, metallic, so thick it coated the back of my throat. The smell of blood and rust, as if every nail in the cabins had been torn loose and left to rot in the sun. Kids gagged as they walked to breakfast, some coughing into their sleeves. The counselors who remained, just 2 now, both younger, their faces strained, pretended nothing was wrong. They forced us into our usual routines, archery, swimming, crafts, anything to distract us. But the smell clung to everything. The lake stank of iron. The canoes left streaks of reddish film across the water. Even the air tasted like pennies. By midday, the animals started vanishing. First the camp dog Bear, who'd always patrolled the grounds. His chain lay broken by the mess hall, links twisted as though wrenched apart by impossible strength. Then the horses in the small corral. They were simply gone, no tracks, no sound. Their gate hung open, swinging lightly in the breeze. Hannah whispered to me, "It's pulling them down." I didn't want to believe her, but the truth pressed in from every direction. At the tree line, leaves had turned black at the edges, curling inward as though burned. A dead crow lay on the trail, its feathers matted with reddish slime, its beak split as if it had screamed itself apart. That evening, Walter gathered us again, but this time no fire was lit. The smell of iron was too strong, clinging even to our clothes. He spoke low, his voice nearly swallowed by the night. "It's feeding," he said. "It's been waiting a long time, and now it's hungry again." Someone asked, "What does it want?" Walter's eyes scanned our faces, settling briefly on me before moving on. "It wants all of us. The mind doesn't just dig through stone, it digs through time, through what came before us, and what came before us has been waiting." The grew and shuddered beneath us, a deep groan like distant thunder. We huddled closer, our shoulders brushing. The trees swayed though no wind stirred. Then came the sound. It wasn't the whispers this time, it was a scream, high, sharp, and human. We froze. It came from the direction of the cabins. We ran. One of the younger counselors, Emily, was on the ground clawing at her leg. Blood poured from a wound that shouldn't have been possible. Her calf was crushed inward, as though something had bitten straight through flesh and bone. She screamed again, ragged and desperate. Walter knelt, pressing cloth against the wound, his jaw tight. "Get her inside," he ordered. But even as we lifted her, the ground rippled beneath us. The iron stink grew stronger, almost choking. From under the cabin, a wet, dragging sound rose, the sound of something vast shifting just beneath the earth. We stumbled inside, slamming the door. Emily's sobs filled the room. Hannah clutched my hand, whispering prayers under her breath. Then the floorboards bulged, just once, a warning. The smell of iron thickened until I could taste it on my tongue, bitter and wrong. And in that moment, I knew Walter was right. It wasn't just hungry, it was hunting. The night after Emily's attack, nobody slept. We huddled in the mess hall, lanterns burning low, every creak of the building making us jump. Outside, the iron smell thickened until it felt like we were drowning in it. But it wasn't just the smell anymore. It was the feeling of being watched. Even with the shutters drawn, I could sense eyes on us, heavy, patient, pressing against the walls. Hannah whispered that she saw shadows moving past the windows, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Still, my skin crawled as if cold fingers traced my spine. Walter paced the floor, muttering to himself. "It knows we're afraid. That's how it finds us. Fear leaves a trail." "What do we do?" Jessie asked, her voice trembling. Walter stopped, staring into the dim light. "You don't feed a fire by giving it wood. You starve it. Don't answer when it calls. Don't look when it shows itself. Pretend it isn't there." Easy for him to say. Later, when the lanterns guttered low, I heard it. A faint scratching, like nails dragging across glass. It came from the far window. Hannah's hand shot out, gripping mine. "Don't look," she whispered. But the sound grew louder, sharper, insistent. My head turned before I could stop it. Something pressed against the glass. Not a face exactly, more like the idea of one. A smear of darkness shaped into eyes that glowed faintly, mouths that opened too wide. The surface bulged inward as if the glass itself wanted to let it through. I yanked the curtain shut, heart pounding. Hannah buried her face in her knees, whispering, "You looked. Oh God, you looked." The scratching stopped. When morning came, we found tracks outside the mess hall. They weren't human, but they weren't animal either. Long, deep gouges in the dirt, like claws dragged through the soil. They circled the building again and again, as though whatever it was had spent the night acing, waiting for someone to step outside. The counselors wanted to keep us busy, but there was no pretending anymore. Kids refused to leave the group. Even the lake was empty, its surface dark and still, the iron sheen glinting like blood under the sun. That afternoon, Mark went missing. One moment he was with us on the trail, the next his place in line was empty. No scream, no sound. just gone. We searched, shouting his name, but the woods swallowed every call. When we returned, Walter sat alone by the cold fire pit. "It's picking us off," he said without looking up. "One by one. That's how it works. It waits until you're alone. Then it takes you." That night we kept tighter watch. But even huddled together, the feeling of eyes never left. Every crack of a twig outside made us jump. The shadows from the lantern stretched too far across the walls, bending in ways that didn't make sense. And just before dawn, when silence lay thickest, I heard my name again. Not whispered this time. Spoken, from just outside the door. By the 10th day, panic had stripped the camp bare of rules. Meals went untouched, kids cried openly, even the counselors no longer pretended everything was fine. The mine had become a living wound in the earth, its breath rising cold across the camp. Walter argued against it, but the two remaining counselors, Emily too injured to walk and David and Claire still standing, insisted they had to act. "If there's any chance the others are alive," Claire said, her face tight with exhaustion, "we can't just sit here." Walter spat into the dirt. "They're not alive, not as you'd recognize. Go down there, and you'll come back wrong, or not at all." But desperation leaves no room for reason. That afternoon, David and Claire prepared to descend. They took lanterns, extra rope, even a flare gun. Claire kissed the silver cross around her neck before slipping it beneath her shirt. Hannah gripped my arm as we watched from the fence. "We shouldn't let them." "What choice do we have?" I asked, though the words felt hollow. The shaft exhaled as they approached. A wet, metallic stench rolled over us, stronger than before, so thick it made my stomach lurch. Still, they tied themselves off and lowered into the dark. At first, everything was quiet, just the squeak of rope and the echo of their boots against stone. Then came Claire's voice, faint but steady. "We've reached the first ledge. There's something written here." Her words echoed oddly, warped as though the stone itself repeated them back. David called up, "We'll light a flare." The glow lit the shaft in an eerie, flickering red. For the first time, I saw the walls clearly. They weren't smooth stone. They were scored, gouged, as if something with claws had tried to climb out. The flare light faded. Claire's voice floated upward, strained now. "It keeps going. The tunnel branches off. We're going further." Walter gripped the rope, knuckles white. "Fools," he muttered. Minutes passed. Then the tremor began. Not the soft pulsing we'd felt before. This was violent, thrashing, shaking dust from the trees. The ropes jerked wildly in our hands, whipping against the stone rim. Below, the lanterns swung madly, their beams slicing through the dark. Then David screamed. It wasn't a short cry. It was long, raw, tearing, the sound of someone being ripped apart. Claire shouted his name, but her words were drowned in another noise. The laughter. That same hollow, broken flute laughter I'd heard before, but louder now, rising from the depths, echoing in ways that made my ears ache. The rope snapped tight. Something pulled from below, dragging hard enough to burn our palms. Hannah and Jessie clung with me, but the fibers creaked, strands fraying. Claire's voice tore through the dark. "Cut it! Cut the rope! Don't let it!" The sound ended in a wet crack. The rope went slack. When we hauled it up, the ends were blackened, slick with that same sludge we'd seen before. No lanterns glowed below. No voices came back. Only the shaft breathing cold against our faces, and the iron stink thickening until it felt like blood clotted in our lungs. Walter's eyes burned in the twilight. "Now you see," he whispered, "the deeper you go, the less of you comes back." The morning after Claire and David vanished, the camp felt emptier than ever. No one spoke during breakfast. The eggs cooled on our plates, untouched. Even the younger kids, usually restless, sat in heavy silence. The mine's breath seemed to seep into everything now, clinging to our skin, our hair, even the taste of water. That was when I noticed the first change. It was Mark's little brother, Simon. He sat across from me, poking at his food with a fork. At first I thought the lantern light was playing tricks, but no. The whites of his eyes had dimmed, tinged faintly gray. When he blinked, it was slow, deliberate, almost too slow. Hannah whispered, "Do you see it?" I nodded, sick to my stomach. By mid-afternoon, more kids were showing signs, pale skin that looked dusted with ash, voices dropping to low, hollow tones. Jessie complained of ringing in her ears, but when I asked what kind, she said, "It isn't ringing. It's words." Walter gathered us behind the mess hall, away from the younger ones. His jaw was tight, his hands trembling. "It's begun," he said. "The mind doesn't just feed, it spreads. It reaches through us, wears us like masks. If we stay, none of us will be ourselves for long." "Then why don't we leave?" Hannah demanded. Walter pointed to the tree line. "Try." We looked. Beyond the clearing, the forest stretched dark and endless. But it wasn't the same woods we'd hiked a week ago. The trees leaned inward, trunks twisted, bark glistening as though wet. And deeper in, the shadows pulsed, not like wind, but like breathing. "It won't let you go," Walter said. "Once you've heard it, once you've smelled its breath, you're marked." That night, Simon disappeared. One moment he was curled in his bunk. The next the blanket lay flat, as if he'd been pulled through it. No door opened. No window broke. He was simply gone. Jessie swore she saw him afterward. "You did near the shaft." "He waved at me," she whispered, eyes wide with terror. But it wasn't him. His smile was wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. We pressed the bunks against the doors, but it made no difference. The tremors returned, slow and steady. Dust drifted from the rafters. Beneath us, the ground throbbed. I woke near dawn to find Hannah sitting upright, staring at nothing. Her lips moved in silence, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Her pupils had shrunk to pinpricks, and for a moment I thought she didn't recognize me. "Hannah?" I shook her gently. She blinked hard, the spell breaking. "I'm fine," she whispered too quickly. "It's nothing." But I saw the faint trickle of blood at her nose. Walter found us later, his expression grim. "It'll try to speak through you. Don't listen. Don't let it in." Easy advice, impossible to follow, because even then, the whispers pressed against my skull, faint but steady. And sometimes, just sometimes, they sounded like my own voice. By the 12th night, the camp wasn't just afraid, it was tearing itself apart. The smell of iron never faded now. It seeped into our clothes, our skin, our lungs. We were breathing it, becoming it. The younger kids whimpered through the nights, but their cries weren't always their own. Sometimes the voices that came from their throats sounded deeper, older, as though something else spoke through them. Walter tried to keep order, but the counselor's absence left a hole too wide to fill. Soon the kids began looking at one another with suspicion. "Jessie's hearing voices," someone whispered. "She talks to herself in the dark," another said. Jessie's face burned with shame. "I don't." But even I had heard it. Late at night, she muttered in that same low rhythm, like the chants echoing from the shaft. When confronted, she swore she didn't remember. It wasn't just her. Simon's bunk still lay empty, but others had begun waking in strange places. Outside the cabins, by the tree line, even closer to the shaft. No one remembered walking there. No one remembered opening the doors. Fear turned to anger. Arguments broke out daily. "We need to leave," one boy shouted. "There's nowhere to go," another screamed back. When Hannah suggested we stick together, a girl named April spat, "Easy for you to say when you're not the one whispering at night." Hannah's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came. Because it was true. I had seen her lips moving in sleep, forming words I couldn't hear. By dusk, the tension snapped. Two boys shoved each other near the fire pit, fists flying, until Walter broke them apart. His patience was gone. "This is what it wants," he hissed. "Division, chaos. Don't you see? Every fight feeds it. Every scream makes it stronger." But his words fell flat. The camp was splitting into factions. Those who believed Walter knew how to stop it, and those who thought he was lying, hiding something. That night, the whispers grew bolder. They didn't just murmur from the shaft. They echoed inside our cabins, curling from corners, seeping through floorboards. They spoke names, secrets, fears. I woke to find Jessie standing over me, her eyes wide, her mouth moving soundlessly. For one horrifying second, her shadow stretched along the wall, tall and twisted, reaching for me. "Hannah!" I shouted. She jolted awake, pulling Jessie back. Jessie blinked, confused, as if she'd just woken. What happened? No one answered. By morning, April was gone. Her bunk was neat, her shoes still at the foot of the bed. Outside, a single trail of footprints led toward the shaft. They ended at the rim. Hannah cried, clutching my arm, but Walter only stared into the hole, his jaw clenched. It's not just hunting anymore, he said. It's calling, and some of us are listening. For the first time, I thought he might be right, because when I leaned over the shaft, the whispers didn't sound like strangers. They sounded like me. The morning after April vanished, the camp awoke to silence. No birds, no wind, even the trees seemed frozen. We gathered in uneasy knots, waiting for Walter to speak, but he stood apart, staring at the tree line as though expecting something. It came just after sunrise. A figure staggered out of the woods, clothes torn, hair matted with dirt. At first, we thought it was April. Some kids even ran forward, crying her name. But it wasn't April. It was Claire. The counselor who had descended into the shaft days earlier, her rope cut, her screams still fresh in my ears, was walking toward us. Her face was pale, lips cracked, eyes glazed, yet she moved steadily, each step deliberate. "Claire!" Jessie shouted, rushing to her. Walter yanked Jessie back so hard she yelped. "Stay away." Claire stopped a few feet from us, tilting her head as if curious. The air grew heavier, that metallic tang pressing against our tongues. "Claire," Hannah whispered, trembling beside me. How are you alive?" Claire's mouth opened. No sound came at first, only a hiss like steam escaping rock. Then words spilled out, jagged and broken, as though her voice was a cracked instrument. Not gone. Not lost. I saw. Her body convulsed, jerking like a marionette tangled in its own strings. It waits, it feeds, it wears. Her eyes rolled back, showing gray instead of white. Walter pulled a knife from his belt, stepping between her and the group. That's not her, not anymore. Kids screamed, begging him to stop, but Claire only twitched closer, her movements wrong, her arms bending at strange angles, her knees snapping too far with each step. I caught a glimpse of her skin where her shirt had torn. Lines ran beneath it, dark veins glowing faintly, like molten metal threaded through flesh. "Please," she croaked, voice splitting into two tones at once. "Help me." Walter raised the knife. Hannah grabbed my hand, sobbing. "He can't. She's still Claire." But before Walter struck, Claire convulsed violently. Her jaw cracked wide open, wider than any humans should, tearing skin at the corners. The sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was the laughter, the same hollow, broken flute sound from the shaft. Kids scattered. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the cabin roofs. Walter slashed downward. The blade struck, but instead of blood, a gush of thick black sludge poured from her wound, steaming as it hit the dirt. The smell of iron intensified, choking us. Claire collapsed, twitching. For a moment, I thought she was finished. Then her body dissolved, skin sloughing off like wax, bones melting into the earth. All that remained was a dark stain in the dirt, still steaming, whispering faintly. We stood frozen, horrified. Walter turned to us, his face grim. "That's what comes back. That's what it makes of you." No one argued. That night we didn't sleep. Every sound, the creak of the cabins, the rustle of branches, felt like Claire returning again. But worse than that was the knowledge that if the mind could bring her back, it could bring any of us. And not all of us were strong enough to resist. After Claire's return and her unraveling, the camp was no longer united by fear. Fear became anger, and anger needed somewhere to go. Walter, the kids who once clung to him now eyed him with suspicion. They whispered in corners, saying he knew more than he told us, that maybe he had made some kind of deal with the mine long ago. Others argued he had killed Claire himself, that she could have been saved if he hadn't struck her down. At dinner, if you could call it that, just stale bread and bitter water, April's best friend, Lena, snapped. "He's lying to us," she shouted across the mess hall. "Every time someone disappears, he has an excuse. Maybe he's the one feeding it." Walter didn't respond at first. He just chewed slowly, his jaw tight. Finally, he set down his tin plate and looked around the room. His eyes were sharp, almost glowing in the dim lantern light. "If I wanted to feed you to it," he said quietly, "you'd already be gone." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting, but the seed was planted. Later, outside the cabins, I overheard kids plotting. "We can't trust him," one hissed. "If we stick with him, we'll all end up like Claire." Even Hannah, sweet, loyal Hannah, confessed doubts. "What if they're right?" she whispered in the dark. "What if Walter's not protecting us, just keeping us close for when the mine wants more?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I wasn't sure anymore either. The breaking point came the next afternoon. Jessie had another one of her episodes, standing stock still, lips moving, words spilling out in a tongue none of us understood. The kids surrounded her, terrified. When she collapsed, they turned on Walter. "You said don't listen, don't speak," Lena spat. "But she listened anyway. And now she's cursed. You can't save her." Walter's face hardened. "I told you. Once it's in you, it never lets go." That was the wrong thing to say. Lena lunged at him, shoving hard. Walter barely stumbled, but the act lit a fuse. Others joined, shouting, screaming, accusing. Some picked up stones. "Stop!" I yelled, but my voice was lost in the chaos. Walter drew his knife again, not to strike, but to hold them back. The mob froze, uncertain. His hand didn't shake. "You'll get yourselves killed," he growled. "All of you. You think it's me? Go ahead, leave camp. Walk into the woods, see how far you get before it takes you." No one moved. The only sound was the steady, sick rhythm of the mine's breath rising from the earth. Finally, Hannah stepped between them, her small voice cutting through. "Stop fighting, please. That's what it wants." The mob slowly dispersed, but the damage was done. Walter had lost them. That night, while everyone else pretended to sleep, I lay awake listening. Whispers rose from every bunk. Secrets, fears, curses. They weren't speaking to each other. They were speaking to it. And I realized then that Walter wasn't our biggest threat anymore. The night after the fight with Walter, the camp split for good. Lena gathered her followers, 7 kids, maybe more, and whispered of escape. "He's keeping us here for himself. If we head out under cover of night, we can make it past the woods before it notices." The rest of us stayed silent, but silence was its own betrayal. They took it as consent. Hannah begged me not to go with them, clutching my wrist hard enough to hurt. "Don't. Please. You've seen what's out there. The forest isn't ours anymore." But part of me wanted to follow Lena, wanted to believe there was a way out, that we weren't just meat waiting to be taken. When midnight came, the night march began. I watched from the cabin window as the group moved in a crooked line toward the tree line. They carried lanterns despite Walter's warning. "Don't light the dark for it," he'd said. "It'll only see you faster." But they didn't listen. Their tiny flames bobbed between the trees like will-o-wisps. At first, the forest let them pass. The shadows shifted, but no branches snapped, no laughter rose. Hope stirred in my chest. Maybe they'd make it. Maybe Walter was wrong. Then the lanterns flickered. One by one they dimmed, swallowed as though the air itself drank the light. The last I saw was Lena turning her lamp higher, defiant, before darkness snuffed it out. Silence followed. We waited, breathless. Minutes dragged. Then came the sound, faint footsteps, not many, just 1 or 2, emerging from the tree line. Hannah squeezed my hand until my fingers went numb. "They're coming back," she whispered. But it wasn't all of them. Only Lena returned. She staggered into the clearing, her clothes drenched as if she'd walked through black water. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, gray-white, unnatural. She smiled too wide, lips cracking. "Made it," she whispered, her voice low, broken. "Told you. We'd make it." Behind her, in the forest, something moved. I didn't see it clearly, only the outlines shifting, shapes bending like tall figures pressed between trees. The laughter followed, faint but sharp, carried on the wind. Walter stepped forward with his knife. Don't let her in. The younger kid screamed at him, but I knew what he meant. Lena wasn't Lena anymore. She swayed in place, head tilting, listening to whispers none of us could hear. Her shadow stretched too far behind her, slithering along the ground like a second body. Then she spoke again, but this time it wasn't Lena's voice at all. It was deeper, layered, many voices folded into one. You belong to us now. The ground shuddered, windows rattled. From the shaft came a groan, like a giant waking under the earth. Walter lunged, but Lena moved with impossible speed, catching his wrist mid-strike. Her grip was inhumanly strong, bending his arm until the bone cracked. He screamed. Kids scattered. Hannah dragged me back, tears streaming down her face. Lena turned toward us, her smile splitting wider, and for the first time I realized the mine wasn't just reaching out, it was sending pieces of itself back. Walter's arm hung useless at his side, bone bent where Lena had twisted it. He staggered back, teeth gritted against the pain, but he didn't drop his knife. His eyes burned with something close to hatred. The rest of us weren't so brave. We crowded into the mess hall, barricading the doors with tables, chairs, anything we could drag. Outside, Lena's shadow slithered back and forth, stretching along the windows, impossibly long. She's not human anymore, Walter rasped, clutching his arm. The mine hollowed her out. Hollowed? Hannah asked, trembling. He nodded. It takes what it wants. Soul, will, memory. Leaves only a shell for itself to wear. Jesse's voice broke. Then April, Simon, Claire. Gone, Walter said, blunt as stone. The younger kids sobbed, but beneath their crying I heard another sound, whispering, not from outside, from inside. I turned slowly. Several children sat apart, rocking gently, their lips moving in silence. Their eyes were dull, unfocused. For a moment I thought they were praying. Then I leaned closer and felt ice crawl through me. They weren't praying. They were repeating the mine's laughter in a soft, breathless rhythm. Walter saw too. His face darkened. It's spreading. We couldn't sleep that night. The barricade shuddered as Lena circled the hall, dragging her nails across the wood. The sound was high and sharp, like metal grating on stone. At one point she spoke in that layered voice again, pressing her lips against the window glass. Let me in. Her breath fogged the pain, but the fog didn't fade. It spread, gray and oily, across the glass until the whole window darkened. Only when Walter slammed his knife into the wood frame did the fog withdraw, seeping back into the night. By morning, 3 of the rocking children were gone. No doors opened, no windows broke. They'd simply vanished from their blankets. In their place were stains on the floor, dark and sticky, smelling of rust. We buried nothing. There was nothing to bury. Hannah clutched my sleeve. We can't fight this. It's already inside us. I wanted to argue, but my throat felt raw. Because she was right. I'd begun to hear the whispers, not just faintly, but clearly. Words curling at the edge of thought, telling me to give up, to lie down, to let it in. Walter noticed my silence. His gaze lingered on me too long, suspicion in his eyes. It's testing you, he said. Don't answer. That evening, Lena appeared again at the tree line, still smiling, still waiting. But this time, she wasn't alone. Figures shifted behind her, dozens. Their shapes blurred, their faces pale smears, but I knew them. The missing, Simon, April, Claire. Their eyes glowed faintly, their mouths twitching in mock smiles. They didn't move forward. They didn't need to. Just watching was enough. The younger kids whispered their names, desperate, hopeful, but Walter barked at them to shut up. They're hollow, he growled. Call to them and you'll join them. Yet I couldn't stop staring, because Simon lifted his hand, waved at me, just as Jesse had described, and for the first time I wanted to wave back. By the 17th day, the changes weren't just in our minds anymore. They were in our bodies. It started small, nosebleeds that wouldn't stop, veins showing darker beneath the skin. Jessie woke screaming, clutching her ears, and when Hannah checked, she swore she saw faint gray threads just beneath Jessie's flesh, winding like roots. It's in the blood now, Walter muttered, pacing the cabin with his broken arm strapped against his chest. The deeper it breathes, the deeper it spreads. We tried to wash, scrubbing ourselves raw at the pump, but the water ran rusty. No matter how much we scrubbed, the smell of iron clung. Our skin cracked, leaving thin fissures that stung when touched, as if something inside was pushing outward. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in a broken shard of mirror. For a moment, my eyes didn't look like mine. The pupils throbbed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the whispers under the earth. Hannah grabbed the shard from my hand. "Don't look too long," she begged. "That's how it gets you." But it was already too late. That night, Walter called us together in the mess hall. His voice was hoarse, his face drawn tight with pain. "Listen carefully. The mind feeds on division. It feeds on weakness. If you feel it in your blood, fight it. Bite your tongue. Break your skin. Do anything to prove you still belong to yourself." Lena's laughter drifted from outside, mocking. The sound made several kids double over, clutching their stomachs as though the sound itself twisted their insides. Then Jessie convulsed. Her back arched, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Dark veins crawled across her arms, glowing faintly like embers beneath her skin. The younger kids shrieked, backing away. "Hold her down," Walter barked. I hesitated, but Hannah didn't. She grabbed Jessie's shoulders while Walter pressed his knife against her palm. With a swift motion, he cut deep. Blood gushed, not red but thick and black, steaming as it hit the floor. The smell of rust filled the hall, choking us. Jessie collapsed, gasping, the glow beneath her skin dimming. For the moment, she was herself again. Walter looked at us with cold, steady eyes. "That's what happens if you give in. The mind fills your veins. It makes you one of its own." No one argued, but fear was no longer enough to hold us together. The kids whispered in corners, some saying Walter was cruel, others saying he was the only reason we were still alive. When the lanterns dimmed near dawn, I woke to find a thin cut on my own palm. I didn't remember making it, yet the wound was clean, as though something had sliced it deliberately. My blood dripped onto the floor, dark and sluggish, almost black. Hannah stirred beside me, eyes glassy. She reached out, touching the wound. Her fingers trembled. "It's in you," she whispered. And for once, I didn't argue, because I had already heard the truth in my own pulse. The whispers weren't just around me anymore. They were inside. By the 18th night, Walter's authority was hanging by a thread. The camp was starving, half-mad, and bleeding black. Every creak of wood, every hiss of wind carried whispers we couldn't shut out. That was when Walter said the words no one wanted to hear. "We need to go down." The mess hall erupted. Shouts, curses, sobbing. Hannah clutched my arm, shaking her head violently. "No, no, he's insane." Walter slammed his knife into the table, silencing us. His broken arm was bound tight, but his good hand still held steady. "It won't stop. Not while we hide up here like cattle waiting their turn. We go down, we find its heart, and we kill it." Jessie, pale and trembling, whispered, "What if it kills us first?" Walter's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then at least we die fighting." The debate raged for hours. Some were too afraid. Others were too far gone, muttering in corners, already half-hollowed. In the end, only 6 of us agreed to go. Walter, myself, Hannah, Jessie, Lena's younger brother Tom, and one of the older boys, Derek. We prepared as best we could. Ropes scavenged from the cabins, lanterns filled with what little oil remained, Walter's knife our only real weapon. The others watched in silence, their faces pale in the lantern glow. Some looked relieved, as though glad to see us sacrifice ourselves in their place. Others looked envious, their dull eyes hungry for the whispers that beckoned below. When midnight came, we stood at the shaft's rim. The air rose hot and fetid, thick with the reek of iron and rot. Shadows twisted along the walls, deeper than the light could reach. Walter tied the ropes to an old support beam, his jaw clenched tight. "No matter what you hear," he said, "don't listen. No matter what you see, don't stop. If it speaks to you in a voice you love, keep climbing." Then he went first, knife clenched in his teeth, lowering himself into the black. One by one, we followed. The shaft swallowed us whole. The rope burned my palms as I slid lower, lantern dangling from my belt. The light barely touched the walls, slick with moisture, streaked with dark veins pulsing faintly. My stomach turned. The stone wasn't just stone, it was alive. Voices echoed around us. Some were strangers, some were not. "Help me," whispered my mother's voice from below. I froze, my chest seizing. My mother had been dead for years. Still, the sound of her filled me with aching need. "Keep moving!" Walter barked. I forced myself downward, biting my tongue until I tasted blood. Deeper we went. The shaft widened, opening into a cavern where the air boiled hot and metallic. The floor glistened, slick as flesh, veins of red and black throbbing beneath our feet. In the center yawned a pit, deeper still, breathing in slow, sucking gasps. Jessie dropped to her knees, clutching her head, screaming. Her skin glowed faintly, veins lit like molten cracks. Hannah knelt beside her, sobbing. "We can't fight this. We'll never fight this." Walter raised his knife toward the pit. His eyes burned with defiance. "Then we'll die trying." The cavern pulsed like a living lung, each breath shaking the walls and rattling our bones. Heat rolled up from the pit in slow waves, stinking of blood and rust. My lantern sputtered, shadows crawling faster than the flame. Walter stood at the edge, knife clenched in his good hand. "This is it," he said, his voice a low growl. "It's heart. We end it here." No one moved. Jessie writhed on the ground, her veins glowing brighter, skin cracking where the light pushed through. Hannah held her, weeping, whispering prayers too soft to hear. Tom clung to Derek, eyes wide and blank, like a child watching his nightmares crawl out of the dark. Then the whispers grew louder, not faint anymore, deafening. They filled the cavern, overlapping voices I knew and voices I didn't. My father, my sister, teachers, friends, all long dead, all calling my name. "Come closer. Fall. Join us." I staggered to the edge. Below, the pit churned. Shapes moved in the dark. Arms, faces, fragments of people, melted together in a writhing mass. Their mouths opened and closed in unison, releasing the broken laughter we'd heard since the beginning. The mine wasn't just alive, it was made of them. Walter stepped forward, raising his knife as if he could cut the earth itself. "No more!" he roared. But the pit responded. A tendril of black flesh shot upward, slick and barbed, wrapping his broken arm. Walter screamed as it yanked him off his feet, dragging him toward the churning maw. Derek and Tom lunged, grabbing Walter's legs. The strain twisted their faces red, veins bulging, but the thing pulled harder. "Cut it!" Walter shouted through clenched teeth. "Cut me free!" I fumbled with my lantern, smashing it against the tendril. Flame burst across its surface, the stench of burning iron filling the cavern. The thing recoiled, shrieking in a dozen stolen voices. Walter collapsed, panting, but Ali. Jessie shrieked then, not in pain, but in ecstasy. Her body convulsed, splitting with glowing cracks. She rose to her feet, smiling with a mouth too wide. Her eyes glowed like molten ore. "It's beautiful," she whispered, voice layered and deep. "Don't you see? It's us. It's all of us. Forever." Hannah tried to hold her, but Jessie shoved her aside with inhuman strength. She spread her arms toward the pit, as if embracing it. "Take me." The cavern roared, tendrils erupted, wrapping Jessie, pulling her down. She didn't fight. She laughed, her voice joining the countless others below. Hannah screamed her name until her throat broke. The pit settled again, breathing slow, satisfied, but its hunger hadn't ended. More tendrils slithered upward, reaching for us, slick and glistening. Walter staggered up, knife dripping black blood. His face was pale, eyes burning with rage. "It's not enough to cut at it. We need to burn it." "But how?" I gasped. He pointed to the oil can strapped to Derek's pack. "We bring the fire down." The ground trembled harder, cracks splitting open, hot air rushing out in blasts. Shadows swarmed the walls, laughing, chanting. We had only one chance left: to burn the mine from within, before it hollowed us all. The cavern shook like a beating heart ready to burst. Heat pressed against us, suffocating, the whispers hammering through our skulls until thought itself began to fray. Walter's voice cut through, ragged but fierce. "Oil! Fire! Now!" Derek yanked the cans from his pack, hands trembling. Tom fumbled with the lantern, spilling precious oil across the slick floor. The black stone hissed as it drank the liquid, veins glowing brighter beneath its skin. The mine wanted it. It hungered for it. Hannah clutched my arm. "If we burn it, we burn with it." I looked into her eyes, wide and shining with terror. Then at least it won't spread. Tendrils burst from the pit, snapping through the air like whips. One seized Derek, dragging him screaming across the cavern floor. Walter lunged, knife flashing, severing the slick coil, but Derek's chest was torn open, his scream ending in a wet gasp. Tom wailed. His small hands shook as he tried to light the soaked rags. Another tendril shot toward him, and I threw myself in its path, the impact slamming me to the stone. The stench of iron and rot smothered me, but Hannah yanked me free before it could coil tighter. Walter limped forward, knife in one hand, torch in the other. His eyes glowed feverishly in the flickering light. "Get it lit!" he bellowed. Hannah struck flint against stone. Once, twice, sparks sputtered, useless. The whispers roared louder, mocking us, promising us eternity in the pit. My head throbbed with their voices. My father, my mother, all urging me to give up. Then Tom's trembling hands found steady ground. The rag burst into flame. Walter snatched it, holding the torch high. For a moment his face was illuminated, broken, bloodied but defiant. "For every name it took," he growled. "For every soul it hollowed." And he hurled the torch into the pit. The world exploded. Flame roared upward, white-hot, Devo, uring the tendrils. The cavern walls split, veins bursting like overfilled arteries, spewing black fire. The mass below shrieked, thousands of voices overlapping, screaming in agony. We ran. Rocks fell like hail, smashing lanterns, crushing stone. Hannah pulled me toward the rope, Tom stumbling behind us. Walter stayed at the pit's edge, knife still raised, laughing bitterly into the inferno. "Go!" he roared. "Don't look back!" I wanted to drag him with us, but Hannah pulled me harder, tears streaming down her face. "He's gone. Please, don't let it be for nothing." The climb was chaos, heat blistering our skin, smoke choking our lungs. The shaft groaned around us, stone collapsing, rope fraying under falling debris. I prayed with every pull that it would hold. At last, we clawed our way out into the night. The earth convulsed, a deep, final shudder. The camp shook, cabin splitting apart. Then the ground sank inward, swallowing the shaft, the fire, the screams. Silence followed. We sat in the dirt, Hannah clutching Tom, both sobbing into the empty night. Smoke curled from the earth, thick and acrid, carrying the faint smell of burning flesh. I stared into the pit that wasn't there anymore, just a black scar in the soil, steaming. For the first time in weeks, no laughter followed, no whispers called. But in the silence, I felt it, a hollow ache beneath my skin, a faint pulsing in my blood. The mine was gone. Yet I wasn't sure it had left us.